Okay, we're going to dive into a massive global change that's happening, well, right under our noses, but mostly in silence. It's this incredible story defined not by what's there, but by what's missing, and why that absence could be one of the most important stories on Earth right now.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. If you've been driving for a while, you probably remember those summer road trips, right? Where after just a couple of hours, your windshield was, completely splattered. But now, for a lot of us, that glass stays pretty clean. And this isn't just some random, quirky observation. It's a very real sign of a much bigger and, honestly, more troubling trend.
And this number? This is why that clean windshield is so alarming. In some areas that have been studied really closely, scientists have recorded a staggering 75% decline in the total biomass of flying insects. So what does that mean? It means if you could somehow gather up all the flying insects in an area and put them on a scale, their total weight has dropped by 3/4. In just a few decades. It's an absolutely jaw-dropping loss.
So what does this silent disappearance really mean for us? Well, experts are starting to see it as more than just an ecological problem. They're seeing it as a planetary health crisis. It's like a vital sign, telling us that something is deeply, deeply wrong with the Earth systems.
I love this perspective from Dr. Varone, who's actually a critical care physician. He has this powerful medical analogy. Just like a high fever is a clear red flag for a patient's health, this decline of insects is a clinical red flag for the planet. It's a flashing warning light, signaling that the fundamental systems keeping all of us alive are under some serious stress.
So that, of course, leads to the big question. What's causing this sickness? It's so tempting to just point to one single culprit, but some groundbreaking new research shows that the reality is this complex, tangled web of causes, way more tangled than most of us could even imagine.
To try and figure this out, researchers at Binghamton University did something pretty brilliant. Instead of just doing one new experiment, they did what's called a metasynthesis. Basically, they gathered over 175 major scientific papers on the topic and mapped out every single cause and every connection ever mentioned, creating the most complete picture we have to date.
And this is what they found. Over 3,000 interconnected causal pathways. This isn't a simple, A leads to B leads to C kind of thing. No way. It's a dense, tangled web of factors all pushing and pulling on each other, creating this perfect storm of pressure on insect populations.
So, what are the biggest threads in that web? Well, the study confirmed a lot of the usual suspects. Agricultural intensification, things like huge single-crop farms and removing natural habitats, that came up most often. Right behind it were pesticide use, climate change, and our expanding cities. But here is the crucial point. These are not separate problems.
And this right here is probably the study's most critical finding. The real danger isn't any single one of these threats. It's how they smash into each other and actually magnify one another. They create this destructive feedback loop where the combined damage is just so much greater than the sum of its parts.
And this illustrates the difference perfectly. So on the left, you see a simple cause and effect. A hot summer is bad for bugs. Simple enough. But the reality is what you're seeing on the right. That hot summer also leads to more pests, which, in turn, leads to farmers using more pesticides. And those pesticides are hitting insect populations that are already weak and isolated because their habitat has been chopped into little pieces by urban sprawl. You see, each stressor makes all the others even deadlier.
Okay, so insects are in big trouble. We get it. But why is this a human crisis? Well, the connections lead directly to our own lives, and it really starts with what's on our plates.
Hey, there's that number again, but this time it means something totally different. About 3/4, 75%, of all the crops we grow for food around the world rely on animal pollinators to reproduce and give us fruit. And guess what? The vast, vast majority of those pollinators are insects.
And if you try to put a price tag on that service, it is absolutely massive. The work these tiny, unpaid laborers do for our global food system is valued at up to $600 billion every single year. It's a free service from nature that underpins a huge slice of the global economy.
So, what's actually at risk? Well, we're not talking about some obscure plants here. We are talking about apples, almonds, your morning cup of coffee, even chocolate. Chocolate is pollinated by this tiny little fly called a midge. The decline of these insects means these foods could become way more expensive, much harder to find, or just gone.
And the impact just cascades through the entire ecosystem. Birds that eat insects, their populations have dropped. The insects that decompose waste in the soil are vanishing, which messes up soil health. And in our rivers and streams, the aquatic insects that are basically the foundation of the food web for fish, they're in a steep decline. It's a classic and terrifying domino effect.
So we know the problem is huge. We know it's interconnected. But that Binghamton study, it uncovered something else. A final and really fascinating twist. It turns out even the scientists who are studying this problem might be missing a huge part of the picture.
The researchers basically asked this exact question. I mean, with thousands of studies out there, you'd think we'd have a pretty complete map of all the threats, right? But when they looked at what wasn't being studied, they found some really shocking gaps.
Just take a look at this list. These are all things we know are major threats to biodiversity in general. The effects of war, fires, floods, even the disturbance from things like railroads. And yet, in over 175 major papers on insect decline, these topics were almost completely missing. We aren't even looking for the damage in these areas.
And here's another massive blind spot. The research is so overwhelmingly focused on what you might call the charismatic insects, bees and butterflies. They're crucial, and people care about them, so they get the research funding. But they represent just a tiny, tiny fraction of all insect biodiversity out there.
And this is the lead researcher himself, Christopher Halsch, spelling out the danger. He says that by focusing so heavily on this one small, albeit important group, we risk creating solutions that might help bees, but could be totally useless or maybe even harmful for the millions of other insect species that are also disappearing.
So the whole point is this. We can't solve this crisis by just focusing on a few popular species or a few well-known threats. We have to start thinking about the entire system. That includes the vast, unseen majority of insects that are busy cleaning our soil, decomposing waste, and literally forming the foundational layer of almost every single ecosystem on Earth.
Which brings us right back to the beginning. The insects, they're not sending out press releases or shouting warnings, they're just vanishing. That silence is the signal. And the question this research leaves us with is a really profound one. Are we willing to truly listen to that silence and act on the complex systemic crisis it represents before the very foundations of our own world just crumble away?